Well, it's week 2, and it's a good thing we don't have any big names that are injured for your fantasy team. It's the Sunday morning fantasy. All right, welcome to the second edition of Back Sports Page Sunday Morning Fantasy. I'm your host, Ryan Stern. You can follow me on Twitter at rstern33. Join with me this week is Marthony Sanders at IM_M_Sanders_, and Derek Mountain at Derek Mountain. How you doing, guys?
Pretty good.
Good.
So we were just discussing right before we went live that Adam Schefter decided to try and drop a bomb that there was the first big COVID-19 positive test in the NFL, and to try and get everyone to tune into ESPN. And all it was Al Riveron, who mans the officiating, and
oh my god,
that was his big tweet. So yeah, I tuned into ESPN just for that, and now goes back to the NFL Network in the background. So
what a joke!
Yeah, killing me. So, but what else is killing us is injuries, and not just injuries to anybody, injuries to some of the biggest names that we have in the game today, and including the number one guy at two different positions. So we'll start off with probably the biggest name, and that's Michael Thomas, wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints. Rolled up his ankle towards the end of the game last week, a game that he really didn't do a whole lot of to begin with. In fact, the Saints, other than Alvin Kamara on offense, didn't really put up a whole lot of fantasy points. But now the Saints are going into their Monday Night Football game against the Raiders in the Raiders' first home game in Vegas, and they're going to be without their star receiver, Michael Thomas. Obviously, this is going to be an enormous boost for Emmanuel Sanders. Who else are you guys looking at to step up in the New Orleans offense? Or do you think this is going to be a week maybe we're going to fade them this week, especially with it being Monday night? Marthony, we'll start with you.
Of course, the given is definitely Emmanuel Sanders, but also probably Jared Cook as well at the tight end spot. Just the fact that he can get a ton of more targets too, dealing with the injury to Michael Thomas. I'm looking at Jared Cook as well, and of course, probably start using even Kamara even more than they did last week.
Derek, what about you?
I totally agree. I mean, it would have been a really nice matchup for Michael Thomas. They just let go of Mukamara. They have Damon Arnett out there, Trayvon Mullen. So it's a very young secondary, but we saw last week against the Bucs. Drew Brees is definitely not the same. He didn't throw a pass past 15 yards last week. Latavius Murray went under the radar and had 15 carries last week against a really stout front seven in Tampa. Vegas is definitely not the same front as Tampa. I think in a deeper league, Murray could be a good play for. If he had 15 carries last week, I think they're going to lean on him even more in that downhill run game, and he could easily be in the ballpark of 18 plus touches on Monday night.
Yeah, the only other name that I could sort of think of is Traquan Smith, wide receiver. I just don't know if I trust him or the potential of the offense this early in the season to take a gamble on someone like him. Maybe if you're playing DFS and you're looking to save some money, Traquan Smith could be a possibility there. But in your year-long league, your season-long leagues, I just don't see Traquan Smith being an option there. The next one we have to talk about is the number one tight end, or for some people still have Ertz But we have George Kittle. The San Francisco 49ers tight end is going to be out of action this week. It sounds like it may only be this week, where as opposed to Thomas, where there's been talks that it could be multiple weeks. But this is going to be tough to fill because there's a lot of pass catchers that you can't trust or that are injured right now on San Francisco. So this right now is a fade. I'm fading the 49ers this week, which sucks because it's such a great opportunity for them. And there may be somebody that comes out and has a great week for the 49ers. In fact, there probably will be because they're going against an atrocious defense. But there isn't anybody that you can trust in your season-long leagues from San Francisco to fill in the missing targets that Kittle's going to get.
I mean, yeah, I tried to look and maybe see like who could possibly be it. I mean, the only slimmer of hope that maybe you could possibly look at, and that's even a stretch, is maybe Jared McKinnon, just because of the touches he might get behind Raheem Mostert. It seems like he's the number 2 guy. Like he's in front of Tevin Coleman, so he may get the touches. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe this week you just stay away from anybody. If you have anybody that's probably better on your roster than anyone from the 49ers, maybe you can. But somebody probably will end up getting great numbers today just because of who they're playing. But it definitely was a tough thing to try to find anybody to see who could probably replace the input that George Kittle has for them.
Yeah, you brought up a great name. McKinnon is definitely in the flex conversation. They utilized him even in the red zone last week, and it wasn't all Raheem Mostert like a lot of us were expecting, and he was getting targets in the red zone. So I don't know if I'm willing to take the chance on McKinnon yet, but he's definitely someone that's going to be on the radar. Derek, what about you?
I agree. I think there's a lot of question marks going in the matchup. One guy that maybe you take a risk on where you save money in a DFS league is Jordan Reed. This is a guy who has been plagued by injuries for his career. He's consistently proven that he's a top 10 pass catching target at the tight end position. He had 20 yards last week. They used him a lot. I think they're going to lean on the run game with Mostert, McKinnon, and make things a little easier on Jimmy G. They get Brandon Ayuk back. It's tough to say, but I think a guy like Jordan Reed, who has played under Kyle Shanahan in Washington, I could see him going on the scene for some big plays, especially if San Francisco can establish the run early. But it's a really risky play at $2,500. Maybe that's a spot where you save some money. But again, that is a pretty big risk to take. So that's the only other guy I think I'd maybe consider in a DFS format.
Yeah, and in fact, you see the jersey I got. It's the Frank Gore revenge game. All those years he spent in San Francisco. Now he comes back, and because of Le'Veon Bell, the starting running back for the New York Jets, he is out. He is on injured reserve with a hamstring injury. And if what happened last week with Le'Veon Bell doesn't tell you that Adam Gase is the worst head coach in the NFL right now, I mean, you have to take the blinders off. He knew that Le'Veon Bell was coming into the season with a hamstring injury. He knew that Le'Veon Bell was hampered by the hamstring injury during the week. He left the field, and then he came back and put him back into the game, and now he's out for a minimum of 3 weeks with the new IR rules. The 49ers are pretty injured on defense, more in the secondary than in the front seven. But is Gore even an option for either of you today?
Nah.
No.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Again, I picked him up in my 16-team league only because it's so hard to find consistent carries. And when I saw that Bell was going on IR. I knew, and I'm also expecting Josh Jacobs. I'm sorry, not Josh Jacobs. Josh Adams to get some touches. They did activate him off the practice squad. We need to see what the status of rookie LaMichael Pirine is going to be. So I'm not expecting Gore to have 25 touches in this game, but Adam Gase loves Frank Gore. He will do anything for Frank Gore. There's probably only one person in this world that loves Frank Gore more than Adam Gase, and that's Mama Gore. He just gives him chance after chance after chance and opportunity after opportunity when there's probably no other team in this league that would have probably given him this chance considering his age and his declining skill set. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see 15 to 20 touches by Frank Gore. But again, he's a decent floor play, but if you're looking for upside, you got to stay away.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's someone you stash on your bench because, like you said, he's a starter for the next 3 weeks, especially with Pirine's status in question. Josh Adams, only guy who can really steal some reps back there right now. But that O-line is still a train wreck. Becton had a lot of promise last week, but they have a very long way to go. I do think Gase is secretly very happy that Gore gets to be his guy now, but this is a stat line where I just see Gore getting 16, 17 carries for maybe 38 yards, something in that ballpark. He doesn't catch any passes. And the 49ers are banged up. I think if the Jets were more competent, especially in the coaching game, they could definitely compete in this game. But if the 49ers do what they're supposed to do, they should be up 2-3 possessions the entire second half, and Gore is completely neutralized. So it's just way too risky, especially first week against that front in San Fran.
So 16 carries for 38 yards. It sounds like another running back that they signed this week, Kalen Ballage. I mean, the Jets are just trying to acquire as much subpar running back play. How Adam Gase has a job is just
really is.
And if you thought that was it, just some of these those big names that we already went over. No, now we have for the second week in a row a different big-time Tampa Bay Buccaneer wide receiver is out. This time it's Chris Godwin with a concussion. They do, and Mike Evans did play. He had, I think, 4 targets, only 1 reception for 2 yards. It just happened to be a touchdown. So he almost salvaged a little bit of a decent game last week with that touchdown. But all reports are that Mike Evans is healthy this week. I have no issues playing Mike Evans this week. But the guy that I'm really interested in is Scotty Miller, the slot receiver. He feels like a Tom Brady target.
Oh yeah, definitely. Right now, if you need a guy to fill in the spot, Scotty Miller is the guy right now. He looks like he's going to be the another one of Brady's slot receiver that he loves to get the ball out to, catching in space, yards after catch. Because even last week he showed some flashes against New Orleans. So, and then now this week going against a very bad Carolina defense. At this point, you would probably just start anybody that's on Tampa Bay's roster against that Carolina defense.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that New Orleans secondary is no joke. And Scotty Miller goes out and has 5 catches, 73 yards last week. There's no doubt his output can be something similar or greater this week. Exactly, building off what you guys just said. That is not a good defense in Carolina. A lot of rookies, a lot of inexperience. Matt Rule's still implementing his culture, his system. And the Bucs are going through the same stuff, but their talent's just overwhelming. They should be able to move the ball at will on Carolina this afternoon.
Yeah, one of the other names that also is intriguing to me, and he keeps getting overshadowed because of the acquisition of Rob Gronkowski. But we're looking at to me, OJ Howard has to start being looked at as someone that should be back on your rosters. Bruce Arians' system doesn't generally cater to tight ends, but Tom Brady's system does. And we know that it's a little bit of both, but probably a little more of Tom Brady's system that's going to be implemented. And OJ Howard looked pretty good last week. And we can't forget that he's 3 years removed from being a first-round pick, the first tight end drafted in the 2017 class, ahead of guys like Evan Ingram. So OJ Howard, I think, has every opportunity now, especially with Chris Godwin out, to maybe have a big game against Carolina. So the next receiver that we will go again. Let's continue with the big names. AJ Brown from the Tennessee Titans. Bone bruise. There's reports that it could be multiple weeks with AJ Brown. It was weird because the Tennessee offense looked pretty good, and it wasn't until we saw last year when we saw Ryan Tannehill take over and him form this big connection with AJ Brown that their offense really took off. And Tennessee's offense looked pretty good last week, but A.J. Brown wasn't really a big part of it. We saw Corey Davis have a much bigger role than anyone could have expected. And obviously that has to be the name that everyone is picking up if you're the A.J. Brown owner.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at definitely looking at Corey Davis just because of the output that he had last week. And I mean, it's a contract year for him. He's trying to prove that he was worthy of that number 5 overall pick in the 2016 draft, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, in the 2016 draft. So he wants to prove that he's the guy that can be maybe a 1A, or not even just a number 2, maybe just 1 and a 1A with AJ Brown to bolster up that offense that's loaded with Derrick Henry in the backfield and the way that Ryan Tannehill is playing. So you're definitely looking at Corey Davis. And I mean, also maybe if you're in a deeper league and probably just need another little sleeper pick, probably Jonnu Smith again one more time just because of how he played last week as well. You might be looking at him as well.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. Corey Davis, yeah, I mean, going off what you said, he's still a top 5 pick. They declined his 5th-year option this year. He has shown flashes, but he's just never put it together. He's always been hurt. But he's 6'3", 215, can run every route, can go up and get the ball, can create a play after the catch. He looked a lot more dynamic to me than A.J. Brown, but obviously Brown was playing hurt last week. And I mean, Brown produced at a really high level last year, but Corey Davis is his potential in Arthur Smith's offense, where they're going to pound the rock with Derrick Henry 30 times a game, and we already saw it in week 1. He's going to get favorable one-on-one matchups, and Tannehill is going to be able to sling the ball down the field a little bit. I think he's a good play, at least someone to stash on your roster if he's still available on waivers. Jonnu Smith, I couldn't agree more. He exploded onto the scene in the playoffs last year. 6'3", 240 guy who can run. I mean, they get him the ball in space as a tight end. They give him jet sweeps. They give him little flat routes where he can create after the touch. And he is their second best pass catcher at this moment. He's a great play against Jacksonville this week.
And the only other name that I could think of, and this would strictly be in PPR leagues only, is Adam Humphries. Humphries isn't going to put up a whole lot of yards. He's not going to put up touchdowns just because that's never been part of his game. But he has the potential to catch 8 balls for 46 yards and have a decent output in a PPR league. I'm probably not even in a half-point PPR. I'm probably still also staying away from Adam Humphries. It would have to be a multiple or a full PPR in order for me to put him in. The last one in terms of injuries that we will talk about is Phillip Lindsay in Denver. Hey, they're going against Pittsburgh, so I don't think anyone was starting Phillip, Lindsay this week anyway. But the biggest impact this is going to have is on Melvin Gordon. And we saw what Pittsburgh was able to do to Saquon Barkley last week. Now, Barkley was able to salvage his week because of catching passes out of the backfield. That necessarily hasn't been Drew Lock's go-to in the early part of his career. He hasn't looked to check the ball off underneath. I think in order for Melvin Gordon to have any sort of success this week, it has to be in the passing game, and Locke has to be able to look for him. Is Gordon somebody that either of you are playing this week? Even if you have someone like a Ronald Jones, I think Ronald Jones is an easy smash play over someone like Melvin Gordon this week.
Yeah, I'm honestly, I would stay away from any running back for Denver. I wouldn't play Melvin Gordon either, just because of the fact of what you said of how stout the Steelers defense were against Saquon Barkley last week. So how aggressive they have been stopping the run already. And we, like you said, Drew Lock hasn't been the guy to just check the ball down to his running backs just yet. So I don't even know if Melvin Gordon will even get that opportunity to even be able to be a pass catcher to help salvage those points with the tough yards that he's probably going to get. I mean, I'd be shocked if he even got over maybe 40, 45 yards on the ground today against that Steelers defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to think Denver's O-line is obviously a lot more competent than New York, but that defense in Pittsburgh is something different. That might be the best defense in all of football. And you got to think Keith Butler's going in this game and he's going to take Melvin Gordon away and say, make Drew Lock beat me. Make him beat me through the air. This guy is a guy who has 6 starts, has thrown for over 250 once. He's averaging about 205 yards a game in each start. They get back Cortland Sutton's listed as questionable. He's slated to come back. KJ Hamler's going to make his debut. I don't see Melvin Gordon making an impact in the passing game, really. I think Keith Butler and that Pittsburgh defense will go into the game taking Melvin Gordon away.
Yeah, so I think we're pretty much all on the same page there. So now we are going to get into our studs, and sleepers portion of the show. So you can utilize this in your season-long leagues, but a lot of this is geared towards who we're looking at for potentially playing in a DFS lineup. I know I mostly play on FanDuel. I just like the setup there. So I used my my rankings based on what the salaries were over on FanDuel. So we're going to start off with our quarterback studs, and sleepers. So Marthony, who is your quarterback stud of the week, which is the guy that is one of the top 10 guys that we're expecting to even outperform where they could be ranked?
This week I'm gonna go actually with Ben Roethlisberger against Denver. Because I mean, last Monday against New York, he looked pretty good. It was nice seeing him back out there on the field, and I don't know the status of AJ Boye. I don't know if he's playing or not, but you know that secondary is kind of depleted, and I like the way that Ben looking. Then we don't know the status of James Conner yet. I don't know if he's going to play or not.
He's playing.
He's playing. Okay. Yeah.
But
I mean, I don't know how well he might perform, so I'm looking at Ben Roethlisberger.
Derek, how about you?
I think Ben too, but I'll go with another guy that I expect to have a huge output. It's Matt Ryan at Dallas today. He's borderline top 5 quarterback for me going into this week. They had 3 receivers get over 100 yards last week against Seattle. Dallas' secondary has been very, very weak the past year. They lose Leighton Vander Esch in the front. I think they'll be able to establish the run even more with Gurley, open up passing opportunities down the field for Matt Ryan. I think there's going to be an absolute track meet. I see Atlanta putting up over 30 today and Matt Ryan putting up 300-plus yards.
Yeah, I'm going to stay in the same game. It's going to be Dak Prescott for me. This game is crazy. This is the first time that I've gone through a matchup and found at least 10 players that I'd be willing to play from this game. I mean, you're looking at both quarterbacks. You're looking at both running backs. There's 4. Yeah, I think 3 receivers are viable options on each team. You have Cooper, Gallup, and Lamb. I think you can easily play. And then you have Jones, Ridley, and Russell Gage, who you may hear his name in a little bit, for Atlanta. And then I would even play Hayden Hurst for Atlanta at tight end. I don't know if I'm willing to play Dalton Schultz yet, even though he did look comfortable filling in for Blake Jarwin when Jarwin went down early on in that game. That's another injury that we could have talked about. But Blake Jarwin is out for the year. Dalton Schultz fills in. But I think right now it's more an uptick for the 3 receivers than it is for someone like a Dalton Schultz. So there's 11 players that I can think of playing in this game. So if you're going to go Ryan, I'm going Dak Prescott. Quarterback duds for this week. Marthony, who you got?
Man, he struggled last week in the second half of the game, and I think he's going to struggle again this week. I'm going Carson Wentz. I mean, if the Washington team can sack him 8 times, and now this week he has to deal with Aaron Donald and that depleted offensive line, I just don't know how he'll be able to keep himself upright right now. So, I mean, he struggled in that second half. 2 poor interceptions that a guy of his stature should not be making. I would definitely stay away from Carson Wentz. I think he's going to do it this week too.
For me, he's maybe a borderline starter, maybe in deeper leagues, 2 QB leagues. I would actually stay away from a guy like Ryan Tannehill. He's not necessarily erratic, maybe like a guy like Daniel Jones, but I don't really see turnovers in Tannehill's game today against Jacksonville. But that's a defense. That's a young defense that played really well last week. And C.J. Henderson, Josh Allen. I expect them to absolutely pound it with Derrick Henry once again. I think there's a classic Titans game where they're going to run, set up the pass, but Tannehill maybe won't have to eclipse more than 18 throwing attempts today against Jacksonville if they do what they're supposed to do, and he might not even get to 200 yards today. That's a guy. It looks like a good matchup, but I'd stay away from him.
Yeah, that's your second pick. That during your analysis, you mentioned somebody that I'll be mentioning later. My quarterback dud of the week is Deshaun Watson. Going against Baltimore's defense. Let's say he's still trying to figure out how to play without DeAndre Hopkins. The secondary of Baltimore is legit. The linebacking core, I think, will be able to contain any sort of rushing ability for him. He's just somebody that I'm really not interested in playing. Even though we all know those big blow-up games can come at any time for Deshaun Watson. This is just not one of those games that I'm expecting to happen. So now our sleepers for the week. In terms of quarterbacks, who you got, Martin?
I'm going to go with Mitch Trubisky. I know he struggled early in the first half against Detroit, but I know he came along strong in that second half, and that the Giants secondary is still kind of trying to find their way, working along here. But I wouldn't be surprised if he did either, but that's why I'm just saying he's a slight sleeper, but nothing too major.
I'm going to break against the grain a little because this guy did not look good week 1. I'm going to go with Tyrod Taylor. And, I think a lot of fans were even more discouraged after the Thursday night game with how the Bengals had played, that the Chargers offense really might not be very good, and they might not be. That's not the point I'm making. I think that the Chiefs are going to get out really fast, and they're going to be up by 20, 30 points in the second half. And I think it's going to be a lot of cheap yards to Eckler and Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry in the second half. Tyrod Taylor's always been able to run the ball. He has that threat in the red zone. I could easily see Taylor sneaking in with 20-plus points just because I expect a lot of garbage time production from a guy like him today.
And my sleeper this week is going to be Phillip Rivers. We saw what Aaron Rodgers was able to do last week against the Minnesota defense, just carving him up. And with Marlon Mack going down this week, we are expected to see an uptick from Jonathan Taylor. I was pleasantly surprised with the amount of work that Taylor got in the passing game last week. But I think this is a big game for any of your Colts. This is my biggest play of the week. Is going to be the Colts against the Vikings. So I will go with Phillip Rivers there. So now we're going to move on to running backs and our stud running backs of the week.
I'm going down to Tampa Bay. I say Ronald Jones. You have to play him. I mean, it's kind of like what we said earlier. Just about anybody from that Tampa Bay offensive roster, if you want to get your hands on them, try to play them. I guess you will go ahead and play them against Carolina. I think he's going to have a big day against Carolina.
All right. Before Derek, before we get into your stud, we do have a question from one of our viewers, and they're asking Josh Allen or Russell Wilson. Boy, this is a good spot to be in. Right now, I don't think you can go wrong either way. Obviously, we know the better matchup is going to be Josh Allen over Miami, but looking at what Russell Wilson did to Atlanta, and I know Atlanta's defense isn't the best, but the fact that they were up big and they were up early and they still put the ball in Russell's hands all throughout the game, my pick is going to be Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I would go with Russell Wilson as well. I mean, I know on paper it looks like you go with Josh Allen just because they're playing Miami, but I mean, he had the same amount of touchdowns as he did his incompletions last week. So I'm definitely going with Russell Wilson.
I will go with Josh Allen. I think both are great plays. That New England secondary is the best secondary in football. I expect Stephon Gilmore to go in tonight and shut down DK Metcalf on the outside. I think they'll look to lock it a lot more. And I think that Pete Carroll alluded to it. It may be coach speak, but I think there's the kind of game where he goes back to his Seattle ways, maybe runs the ball and pounds it a little more. Because that's what New England's going to try to do tonight with Cam Newton. I think there are two teams that are going to try to possess the ball a little bit more. I think Pete Carroll knows that New England's passing attack isn't a huge threat. I think Seattle bogs it down a little bit, and I go with Josh Allen just because he always has that threat of getting 50, 60 yards on the ground and getting a score on the ground.
And to piggyback off of that, we have another question, and it's from Brendan. How you doing, Brendan? Do I play Corey Davis over Diggs or Lockett? Now, this piggybacks off of what you were just saying with the New England secondary. I would expect Gilmore to actually lock up more with DK Metcalf. I think that Metcalf is going to be the one that's going to be on the outside more often, and that's where Gilmore likes to play. He normally doesn't shadow somebody. He sticks to the outside. So I think the chance for Tyler Lockett to have a decent game would be better than someone like DK Metcalf. Right now, Stephon Diggs is in my lineup. So the question would be Corey Davis or Lockett. And I'm probably still playing Tyler Lockett, even though I like Corey Davis's matchup a lot better. I just trust the offense more.
Yeah, I'll probably still go with Tyler Lockett over Corey Davis too, even though he does have a great matchup. I just think he'll get even more opportunities, knowing the fact that we know that Gilmore probably is going to be on DK Metcalf. So I'm probably still going to go with Tyler Lockett over Corey Davis.
Yeah, I totally agree. I go Lockett. You get free releases in the slot. I think I like him more than Diggs too. Byron Jones let up one completion last week. I know it's Edelman, N'Keal Harry, it's not the same. Diggs is much more talented than those guys, but I think Lockett's going to have a lot more opportunities in the slot. I think DK is going to get locked up on the outside. So I agree. I'm going to go with Lockett.
All right. Thanks for the question. Also, any of our viewers, if you have any questions for your teams, please leave in the comments below, and we will get to them on air. So now we will continue with our running back studs of the week. And Derek, you're up.
We already mentioned him, but I'm going to go with Todd Gurley just because of the Lane Vander Esch loss in the middle. This is a Dallas defense that, I mean, they look great, but Gurley had 22 carries last week. We're not concerned about the knees yet. And Dan Quinn and the Falcons have made a point to say that they want to get Gurley the ball. They want to establish the run, to set up their pass game. But I think to take the ball away from a team like Dallas today, keep the ball out of their hands, I think they're going to try to neutralize the game a little bit by really pounding it with Gurley.
Yeah, and I said it's tough to not like one of those options from that game. My stud of the week is going to be Derrick Henry. We mentioned last week he quietly had 31 carries for 116 yards. It's not the efficiency that we're used to seeing from Henry, but he's going to get pounded the rock, play in and play out. Against Jacksonville, I expect them to have more success on the ground than they do through the air. And when you have someone who gets better as the game goes along, Henry is just an absolute slam dunk play for me. Marthony, who's your dud running back of the week?
My dud, I know he probably wasn't that big on the radar anyway, but just off the game he had last week, Adrian Peterson. I know last week he had 14 carries, 93 yards, but he's playing against that Green Bay defense, and they pretty much for the majority of the game shut down Dalvin Cook last week. He got some garbage time points last week, but I would stay away from Adrian Peterson this week if you had him on your roster.
We talked about it earlier, but I'm just staying away from the Pittsburgh backfield. Connor slated to play. Benny Snell looked really good. And I mean, the front in Denver isn't as good, obviously, without Von Miller, but just like Ryan said, they held Derrick Henry to under 4 yards a carry. I think Ben Roethlisberger is a great play this week. You already saw it with Juju, and kind of that jolt that they had. I expect them to pick up where they left off, but that running attack is a pretty big risk. I think Snell is going to be way more in the mix now that he had over 100 yards, but it's just a really risky play. You don't know how it's going to play because Tomlin's usually very loyal and likes to bell count his backfield, but Snell looked like the better option last week. That's just a backfield I stay away from.
Yeah, and Rappaport even tweeted out a couple minutes ago that they're expecting a 50-50 time split between the two. So
yeah,
when you know that you're not getting the majority of carries from either one, yeah, that's one you want to stick away from. And mine is someone that we mentioned earlier, Melvin Gordon. It's just not the right play against that defense. I think based on where you drafted Gordon, there is a decent chance that you have one or two options on your team that you can play above him. Again, like I said, I would play someone like a Ronald Jones. I would play someone like maybe even someone like a Devin Singletary or a Zach Moss in Buffalo with those good matches that they have against Miami. So yeah, I'm staying away from Gordon. We will move on to wide receivers and stud wide receiver of the week.
We already mentioned this game. I think it's going to be a shootout. Michael Gallup down there against Atlanta. The secondary is atrocious. It's probably going to be whoever the first to 30 is probably going to win that game. So I'll definitely go with Michael Gallup as my stud.
I'm going to actually steal a little bit of Ryan's thunder here because he hit the nail on the head last week, and he may fall more in the sleeper category, but Darius Slayton. This guy's a must start from here on out for anybody that owns him, I think. He's clearly Daniel Jones's favorite target. That Chicago defense is really good, but they might be without Robert Quinn again. They might be without Khalil Mack. That secondary has had question marks on the outside. Fuller's really good, but they have Jalen Johnson on the outside. Slayton put up 100 yards and 2 touchdowns against that Pittsburgh defense. His ceiling is as high as it gets. In a DFS league for $5,000, I think, on DraftKings, like that's an easy play for me. I'm going Darius Slayton as a stud.
It's crazy. I don't know if you heard the stat. Since week 5 last year, Darius Slayton leads all wide receivers in touchdowns.
I believe it, though. I believe it. I mean, he's a stud.
He has 10 touchdowns since week 5 last year. 4 of them he has 4 games with multiple touchdowns. So, I mean, he's going to, when he hits big. So, my stud wide receiver of the week, and this may be a little bit of a play that you're not as confident in, but Mike Evans. Mike Evans is going to be my stud of the week against that really, really bad Carolina defense. Aside from Scotty Miller, there aren't going to be any outside targets that are going to be threatened from anyone else in the Tampa Bay offense. Again, Mike Evans has the closest skill set of anybody Tom Brady has had since Randy Moss. Like I said, I'm not calling him Randy Moss, but when you look at the skill set that Evans brings to the field, it's a lot. It's very similar to how that 2007 team looked. So I am going to go with Mike Evans as my stud. Who you guys got as your dud wide receivers of the week?
I'm going back to the Pittsburgh-Denver game, and I'm staying away from Jerry Jeudy. I just don't know if he'll be able to get anything going against that Steelers secondary. I think it's just going to be hard for anybody for Denver to probably do anything against Pittsburgh today.
I'm staying away from Will Fuller. Ryan talked about it with Deshaun Watson, and I think clearly there's an advantage to being a number one in that offense, whether that's Deshaun Watson or the scheme, but Marlon Humphrey's an absolute stud on the outside. That secondary is lights out, and I expect them to key Will Fuller all day and keep a safety over the top. I'm fading Will Fuller today.
My dud is actually going to be one of the bigger names, and that is Tyreek Hill. I think he's going to see shadow coverage from Casey Hayward out in LA. I think he's going to be the main focus of the Chargers, allowing some other players to get those targets. And to be honest, he didn't look particularly good week 1 against Houston either. So Tyreek Hill is going to be someone that I'm going to stay away, especially in season long. You can't bench Tyreek Hill. He went in the top 15, 20 picks in your draft. You just can't bench him yet. But in terms of DFS, I'm staying away from Tyreek Hill. Who you guys got as your sleepers?
A guy we mentioned earlier already, Scotty Miller. Once again, we're going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. Just think it's just, like I said, it's just one of those perfect targets that Tom Brady likes, a guy that's coming out of the slot. A lot of attention is going to be trying to get focused on Mike Evans, but everyone should be getting their targets there. Everyone should come out pretty happy today against Carolina.
I'm going to go with Paris Campbell in Indianapolis. This is a Minnesota front that is really good. They're still without Danielle Hunter. And Godwin struggled last week. I expect him to pick it up. Their safety, they probably have the best safety tandem in the league in Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris, but on the outside, they got Jeff Gladney and Cam Dantzler, 2 rookies, and they got absolutely torched last week. Not obviously by Devontae Adams, that's a given, but you saw guys like Lazard and Valdez-Scantling combined for 160 and 2 touchdowns. Paris Campbell, he looked like the version that they drafted 2 years ago. 6 catches, 71 yards last week. And I think without Jack Doyle, he's a prime candidate for 8+ catches today. He's very dynamic with the ball in his hands, and I expect a big game from Campbell today.
In my sleeper again, I'm going back to the Atlanta and Dallas game, and I'm going to go Russell Gage. There's going to be so much attention that's going to be put on Julio Jones, on Calvin Ridley, on Todd Gurley, that Russell Gage right now, especially with how he looked last week, right now it's tough to keep him out of the lineup because he just offers so much upside. I know not necessarily in terms of targets because Julio's going to get his, Ridley's going to get his, but in terms of the prime targets, I think that there's going to be so much attention put on those two outside guys that he can pick up another touchdown or two in this game. So I'm going to go Russell Gage as my wide receiver sleeper. To wrap it up, we have our tight end studs, duds, and sleepers. So you guys got for your stud.
I'm going with Jared Cook. Maybe just because of the fact that the Michael Thomas injury. So that leaves Emmanuel Sanders out there on the outside. So that gives that's another target that Drew Brees likes to look to. Even though, like we said last week, he didn't go vertically down the field with their passing attack. I think they'll try to do it again this week playing Las Vegas. That's so weird saying Las Vegas. But I know this week he'll probably try to look at Jared Cook more often down the field and try to attack them because they got into a shootout last week with Carolina. So I'm looking at Jared Cook. I'm
going to go with Dallas Goedert. There's a guy that's still viewed as a borderline top 10 guy, but he really shouldn't be at this point. He should be a must start from here on out. We saw what the ceiling was last week, which is over 100 yards and a touchdown, but his floor is really high too. Since week 11 last year, he's had at least 7 points in every single game in PPR formats. With the wide receiver issues that the Eagles had last year, they went way more 12 personnel and Goddard produced. Deshaun Jackson for right now is on a pitch count. Rager for the moment is a little raw. He's a deep threat, but not going to have the most polished route tree. And I think the Eagles are going to try to establish the run a lot more today with Miles Sanders giving cleaner looks and more one-on-one matchups down the field. And Goddard's way more of a threat after the catch than Ertz. I think his ceiling, like we saw his ceiling last week, like I said, but his floor, he's a very safe play. I like Dallas Goedert this week.
And my stud is actually going to be Hunter Henry. I think the Chiefs' defense can be beaten by the tight ends. We saw Henry involved in the game plan last week. They're going to be passing the ball a lot because a lot of us are expecting KC to be up early and often. So it's going to be a positive game script for the passing in terms for the Chargers. Keenan Allen didn't look great last week. Mike Evans is still recovering from his injury. So I think we can expect to see a lot from Hunter Henry this week. Who you guys got as your duds?
Bronco fans, I'm sorry I keep picking on your players, but no offense, I wouldn't touch them this week either. Once again, just talking about how great their defense is in Pittsburgh, and especially the way that they kept Evan Ingram in check last Monday as well. So I wouldn't touch Noah Fant.
I'm sticking with the Eagles, and I'm going with Zach Ertz. I think it doesn't help that he's in a contract dispute, and Goddard has obviously showed a ton of promise and potential at that position. I still think they're going to target Ertz a lot, but with guys like Deshaun back, Rager, and Goddard, and now Sanders back in the backfield, I don't think Ertz is that top 3 guy going forward until some things change. That week 1 performance was not encouraging at all. He had a crucial drop on 4th down in the 4th quarter to contribute to their loss last week, and I would fade Ertz.
and Ertz was going to be mine. So I like that pick. My fade is going to be Mike Gesicki. I think a lot of us were expecting him to be more involved last week than he was. They're going against a tough defense in Buffalo. And even though it looks like there's going to be no Devonta Parker this week, we can maybe expect to see an uptick in targets for Mike Gesicki. There was something that was off. Again, it could have been that they played a really good Patriots defense, but they're going against another really good defense this week as well. So Mike Gesicki is going to be my fade this week. And last one, our tight end sleepers.
This guy shouldn't really be a sleeper, but for some people, I guess in the league, because we mentioned him earlier, they might be still in such of awe of the name of Rob Gronkowski. But I think OJ Howard should be definitely a play again for this week. Once again, it's just a matchup with Carolina. I mean, and even last week he showed some flashes. So I think he's showing the potential what he could be as that first round pick that they put in him. So I'm liking OJ Howard.
I'm going to go with Logan Thomas in Washington. Tight end is just going off OJ Howard. I mean, that's a position where it takes some guys 3-4 years. This guy was a college quarterback at Virginia Tech, but when we're talking about just measurables and raw athleticism, this guy's comparable to someone like Darren Waller last year. He's 6'6", 260. He runs he's legit 4.6 speed. He's a fluid athlete.
Logan Thomas?
Yeah, Logan Thomas.
Okay.
Last week he gets 37 yards and a touchdown against the Eagles. The Cardinals gave up the most fantasy points to tight ends last year. Now it's different with Isaiah Simmons in a linebacker starting for them, but he struggled last week. I think the game's a little fast to him right now. He was a little tentative. Logan Thomas obviously isn't the guy that Kittle is, but I just don't think there are that many guys that can really steal targets in Washington at this point. It's McLaurin, it's Sims, it's Logan Thomas. I think he has a pretty high floor moving forward in Washington, and he's a sleeper for me.
Yeah, my sleeper is going to be Chris Herndon, only because, and this is another name we hadn't gotten around to mentioning, only because he's with the Jets. But Jamison Crowder, who is by far the target leader with gangrene, he's out. He's out this week. He tweaked his hamstring on his 70-yard touchdown last week. There is nobody else, I think, in New York that is worthy of getting that type of target share. And I think Chris Herndon is going to have a huge impact on the New York offense this week. I hate putting eggs in the Adam Gase basket, but you're just – and for DFS, you're not paying a lot for him. He's so cheap. So Chris Herndon's going to be someone that I'll get into at least one or two of my lineups. Guys, I want to thank you for joining me this week. I thought this was a really good one.
Thanks for having us, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, always.
Absolutely. So again, make sure you're following us on social media at rstern33, at @IM_M_Sanders_, and at Derek Mountain. Make sure you're looking at backsportspage.com for all the great content that's going up, and to follow the archives for all the great podcasts and web shows that we have going up there. So until we meet next week, I hope everyone does well, except you, Mark, in fantasy this week. And hey, guys, enjoy watching football. We will speak next week.
Absolutely. Go Birds.
Sure.